Merce, let's talk about that win for Arsenal. We talk about statement wins, but when you look at the form Aston Villa were in, how did the Gunners dismantle them in the way they did?
Mikel Arteta has turned Arsenal into a nightmare for Premier League teams. Not because they overwhelm you with stars, and not because they surprise you, but because they quietly take everything away.
I thought Arsenal were excellent. I think they've been excellent all year, actually. They're very difficult to score against, and they're managing to get the job done, whether it's a set piece or whatever it is, whatever it takes. That's what champions do.
Space, time, options. Matches start to feel smaller, tighter, harder to escape. Look at the numbers and the story sharpens. 4 Premier League wins in a row. After 19 games, Arsenal have scored 37 goals.
Looking for space. Brilliant from Eza.
And conceded just 12, the best defensive record in the race.
Defensively, they are just so strong. We're tracking Arsenal this season against some of the best numbers that we've ever seen defensively in the Premier League. And this is not a slight Arsenal, is it? This is a serious superpower.
No red cards, relentless territorial pressure, over 660 touches in the opposition box. This isn't noise, it's structure doing damage. And just when the margins were supposed to catch them out, bodies started coming back, leaders returning, balance restored, the machine running smoother even without everyone available. Arsenal still walked into a title-defining night and dismantled Aston Villa, a team on an 11-game winning run, scoring 4 goals and ending the run without mercy. This is a side winning through control, depth, and repeatable habits, powered by informed difference makers like Leandro Trossard, Martin Zubimendi, and a goalkeeper shutting games down when it matters most. So the question isn't whether Arsenal can play, the question is whether anyone can survive them, especially now with momentum building and pressure shifting. This is why Arteta's new tactics are making Arsenal unplayable.
And the moment I start to think about that, I feel goosebumps and excitement.
What makes this Arsenal team so uncomfortable to face isn't about speed or flair or those magical individual moments that light up highlight reels. It's something more suffocating. They control what happens next. Every single phase of play is designed not just to handle the current situation, but to dictate the one coming right after. That's the heartbeat of Mikel Arteta's evolution this season. When Arsenal attack, they're already positioned to defend. When they lose the ball, there's no panic, no scrambling, just an immediate squeeze. The distances between their back line, midfield, and attackers stay compact, which means opponents barely get a second to look up and think clearly. Passing lanes shut down fast. Decisions get rushed. The entire game feels like it's shrinking. This is why Arsenal's dominance doesn't always scream at you in the moment, but by the 90th minute, it's crushed you. 19 league games in, 37 goals scored, just 12 conceded. That defensive record, it matters more than anything. It's not just the best in the title race, it is the structure. This team isn't taking gambles. They're running repeatable patterns that consistently tilt games their way. Their attacking output backs this up perfectly. Arsenal's expected goals sits at 35.6, and they've scored 37. Almost a perfect match between the quality of chances they create and their finishing. No wild overperformance, no reliance on purple patches, just sustained pressure converting into goals. That balance is everything. Teams that vastly overperform their underlying numbers, they usually crash back down. Teams that match them, they sustain it. Here's where Arsenal really pull away from the pack, where the game actually gets played. They've racked up 665 touches in the opposition box, more than any other contender. That's not about the odd counterattack or moment of brilliance. It's about living in dangerous areas. Games are constantly tilted toward the opponent's goal because once Arsenal gain ground, they refuse to give it back. They've completed 9,417 passes this season, but not just to keep the ball for the sake of it. They're moving defensive blocks side to side, stretching them, testing them, until the moment arrives to strike. That's why Arsenal can take 194 shots, 97 on target, while still looking patient. The shots come after sequences that force defenders to react, not anticipate. This is dominance by exhaustion. Every clearance becomes another wave coming at you. Every reset is another test of your concentration. Arsenal's defensive work reinforces the whole philosophy. Anticipation over desperation. 133 interceptions, 48 blocks, 424 clearances. Those aren't the numbers of a team getting overrun. They belong to a side that spots danger early and positions itself before it fully develops. Arsenal don't wait for problems to arrive at their doorstep. They snuff them out while they're still forming. And here's the thing, this control extends to discipline. Across 19 games, 0 red cards, just 26 yellows. That emotional regulation is massive in a title race. Staying at full strength every single week preserves structure, rhythm, and the trust players have in the system. Set pieces aren't some bonus. They're a direct extension of Arsenal's territorial stranglehold. With 110 corners, 6 goals from free kicks, and a perfect 3 from 3 on penalties, Arsenal consistently cash in on sustained pressure. Even when open play gets congested, they still generate dangerous moments. This matters especially against teams sitting deep, where breaking through becomes a grind. Arsenal don't force it. They manufacture opportunities through positioning and sheer repetition. Everything loops back to Arteta's core principle: control the next action. When Arsenal lose possession, they're already set to win it back. When you break their first line of pressure, you immediately hit the second. When you somehow escape that, the pitch is already narrowed around you. The result? Opponents rarely get clean chances even during their own spells of possession. And over time, the fatigue sets in. Those 665 touches in the opposition box aren't just creating chances, they're draining defenders mentally and physically. By the final 20 minutes, opponents aren't picking the right option anymore. They're just picking the fastest one available. That's why Arsenal don't need frantic end-to-end chaos to dominate. Their control does the heavy lifting. This is the foundation everything else is built on. The returning players, the squad depth, the statement wins. Without this structure holding firm, none of it works. And right now, this structure is making Arsenal extremely hard to breathe against. This is the part that should genuinely worry Arsenal's rivals, because they've built this position at the top while managing constant disruption, and now that disruption is clearing up. For most of the season, Arsenal have been patching things together on the fly. Defensive reshuffles, midfield gaps, key leaders out for weeks, yet somehow the structure held. Results kept rolling in. That was impressive enough on its own, but here's what changes everything. The core is coming back into a team that's already clicking. Arsenal's climb to the summit hasn't been built on a settled best 11. Far from it. Injuries, especially at the back, became a constant storyline. There were stretches where Arteta had to get creative with the back line, push midfielders into unfamiliar spots, and lean on squad flexibility rather than any kind of consistency. And still, Arsenal stayed in control. They beat quality teams. They protected slim leads. They remained the league's stingiest defense despite all the disruption. That's not luck. It's proof that the system, not just the individuals, is doing the heavy lifting. Now here's what should concern everyone else. Those individuals are walking back into a system that's already humming. Gabriel Magalhaes returning is the perfect example of what's happening across the squad. In his first start since early November, he didn't just steady the defense, he scored, setting the tone in that statement win over Aston Villa. But his real value goes way beyond goals. Gabriel's aggression in duels lets Arsenal push higher up the pitch, squeeze the game, and win second balls earlier. That keeps the midfield closer to the attack, tightening distances and reinforcing that control the next action philosophy. When Arsenal have their first choice center backs available, opponents get even less room to operate between the lines. The pitch shrinks all over again, and one of the most crucial returning pieces, the conductor himself, Martin Odegaard. His season's been stop-start, and that matters because Arsenal's attacking rhythm isn't built on pace, it's built on timing. Odegaard dictates when to speed things up and when to slow them down. He decides when to circulate and when to release that killer pass. His goal against Brighton wasn't just a nice moment, it was a statement. Arsenal's possession becomes genuinely purposeful when he's sharp. Opponents get shuffled side to side for longer stretches, which eventually cracks open gaps somewhere else. With Odegaard back pulling strings, Arsenal don't just keep the ball, they use it to pin you in place. This is where Arsenal's squad building finally pays off. When players have been missing, the replacements haven't changed how they play, they've just stepped into roles that already exist. That's how Arsenal could still take apart Aston Villa, a team riding an 11-game winning streak, even with absentees and fitness concerns elsewhere. They weren't at full strength, yet they delivered a second half that overwhelmed one of the hottest teams in the league. Real depth isn't about big names sitting on the bench, it's about everyone knowing the structure inside out. Arsenal rotate without losing their identity, the distances stay consistent, the pressing triggers stay the same, the defensive spacing doesn't shift. That consistency is what lets returning players lift the level immediately instead of causing disruption. Gabriel Jesus coming back adds another dimension. His goal against Villa, scored literally a minute after stepping off the bench, wasn't just a tidy finish. It was a reminder of the variety Arsenal now have within the same framework. Jesus brings movement, pressing intelligence, and link-up play in congested areas. Where other strikers stretch defenses vertically, he destabilizes them horizontally. That's huge late in games when defenders are already mentally drained from constant pressure. And again, the key detail, Arsenal didn't need to reshape anything to fit him in. He slotted straight into the existing pattern and cranked up the intensity. With Kai Havertz also back in the mix, Arsenal gain another weapon without losing balance. Havertz gives Arteta height from midfield, late runs into the box, and physical presence during those long attacking sequences. That's crucial in games where Arsenal dominate possession but need runners to turn pressure into goals. It's not a tactical revolution, it's a refinement. Here's the big picture. Arsenal have already shown they can win when things aren't perfect. They've held onto narrow leads. They've weathered late pressure. They've rotated heavily and still picked up points. Now, with key players returning and everyone settling back into established roles, the margin for error tilts further in Arsenal's favor. The system doesn't have to compensate for missing pieces anymore. It can fully express itself. That's why Arsenal are getting harder to face, not easier. The floor was already high. Now the ceiling is lifting, quietly, efficiently, right in the middle of a title race. And that makes what's coming next even more significant. Now let's talk about the Aston Villa game. To understand why Arsenal's 4-1 dismantling of Villa felt so emphatic, you need to rewind to the first meeting, because this wasn't just a big win, it was an answer. On December 6th, Arsenal walked into Villa Park sitting top of the league, facing a side growing in confidence. What followed was one of those matches that quietly sticks with you through a title race. Arsenal didn't get blown away, they didn't abandon their principles. Actually, the numbers tell you it was pretty even. Expected goals sat at 2.16 to 1.92, shots were level at 15 each. Possession hovered in the low 50s territory and box entries were competitive, but football doesn't reward control alone, it rewards moments. Villa struck first through Matty Cash, exploiting a lapse at the back post. Arsenal responded, and Leandro Trossard once again made an instant impact off the bench to level things. And then came the gut punch. Deep into stoppage time, with Arsenal looking like they'd steadied things, Emiliano Buendia found space at the edge of the box and curled home a last gasp winner. Arsenal left with a 2-1 defeat that didn't feel like a collapse, but absolutely felt like a warning. That night crystallized two thoughts that followed Arsenal into December. They could dominate long stretches and still get punished late. Villa, specifically, believed they could disrupt Arsenal's rhythm and hang on long enough to land a decisive blow. It was the kind of loss that doesn't wreck a season, but demands a response. Fast forward to December 30th, and the context had shifted massively. Aston Villa rolled into the Emirates on an 11-game winning streak, one of the hottest sides in the league, with growing whispers that their intensity and counter-attacking threat might catch Arsenal out again. The storyline practically wrote itself. Villa had already done it once. Arsenal had injury concerns. Pressure was building at the top. Even Arsenal's recent performances added fuel. They'd ground out wins against Wolves and Everton, protected a narrow lead over Brighton despite late pressure, and leaned heavily on structure rather than fireworks. This wasn't a team sprinting, it was a team managing itself carefully, and that made people wonder, would Villa find the opening again? The first half did little to quiet those doubts. Villa looked dangerous on the break. Arsenal missed Declan Rice, and there were moments where Villa sliced through midfield a bit too easily. At halftime, the match still felt very much alive. Then came the second half, and with it, the clearest display of Arsenal's growth this season. Within minutes of the restart, Gabriel Magalhaes opened the scoring from a corner, capitalizing on pressure and aggression inside the box. It wasn't just a goal, it set the tone. Arsenal's territorial dominance finally had its breakthrough. From there, the game tilted sharply. Martin Zubimendi doubled the lead moments later, arriving into space and finishing with real conviction. Villa were no longer breaking forward with confidence. They were backing off. Arsenal's press intensified, second balls got gobbled up, and Villa's outlets started vanishing. By the time Leandro Trossard swept in the third, the match had completely changed character. This was no longer a contest of belief, it was a lesson in control. And when Gabriel Jesus came off the bench to score within seconds of stepping on, the message was complete. Arsenal didn't just beat Villa, they erased them from the game. The contrast between the two meetings was striking. Expected goals rose to 3.17 to 2.67. Arsenal outshot Villa 22-11. Shots on target favored Arsenal 7-3. Touches in the opposition box swung decisively 38-20. Those numbers reflect more than just finishing. They reflect territorial suffocation. Villa, who had thrived on quick transitions all season, got pushed deeper and deeper until their counters turned into desperate clearances. Even the late consolation goal couldn't hide the reality. The match had been decided long before stoppage time. This wasn't about revenge, it was about refinement. In the first meeting, Arsenal controlled phases but left gaps open late. In the second, they closed those gaps. The back line held higher. The midfield squeezed sooner. Pressing triggers were sharper. And crucially, Arsenal committed bodies at exactly the right moments instead of rushing things. That's the difference between a strong team and a title-ready one. Beating Aston Villa mattered not just because of the scoreline, but because of what Villa represented. They were the hottest side in the league. They'd already beaten Arsenal once, and they arrived believing they could do it again. Arsenal's response was to turn belief into exhaustion. One half was all it took. And in a title race where margins are razor thin and narratives shift every week, that second half felt like a line being drawn, not just against Villa, but against the idea that Arsenal could be rattled when the pressure peaks. That's what made it a statement. What separates Arsenal right now isn't just the system, it's how individual brilliance is amplifying that system week after week. Over the last 5 league games, the patterns from Chapter 1 have been executed by players who aren't just clear on their roles, they're thriving in them. This is where control becomes points. Let's start with Leandro Trossard, because his influence over this stretch has been massive. Trossard has become Arsenal's most reliable finisher, the player who converts sustained pressure into goals when opponents are already stretched thin. In the last 5 league games, he's been directly involved in multiple decisive moments, scoring against Aston Villa, equalizing in the first Villa meeting earlier in December, and consistently finding shots from inside the box after long possession spells. His greatest strength? Timing. He doesn't rush things. He waits until defenders are reacting rather than thinking ahead, then strikes with minimal touches. That kind of patience is priceless in a team built on territorial dominance. Next up is Martin Zubimendi, arguably the most important structural addition to Arsenal's title push. Across the last 5 matches, his role has been about rhythm more than volume. He consistently receives the ball under pressure, plays forward quickly, and lets Arsenal reset attacks without dropping deep. His goal against Aston Villa, a clean outside of the boot finish, came from exactly that. Quick recognition, immediate execution, no wasted movement. Over this stretch, Arsenal's midfield circulation has been noticeably faster when he starts, which directly connects to their rising shot numbers and sustained box presence. Then there's the man who decides whether dominance turns into worry or calm, David Raya. Arsenal's defensive record, 12 goals conceded in 19 matches, is built as much on positioning as it is on shot stopping, and Raya has delivered the moments that protect narrow leads. Over the last 5 games, his saves against Brighton and Wolves stand out not because they were spectacular, but because of when they came. These are the stops that kill momentum swings. He's now sitting on 9 clean sheets, and in a title race, those aren't just numbers, they're points banked. In midfield, Declan Rice continues to be Arsenal's anchor, even when circumstances push him into unfamiliar roles. Over the last 5 matches, his influence has stayed constant through set pieces that generate goals, second ball recoveries that restart pressure, and defensive reads that snuff out counterattacks before they even develop. His numbers don't fill highlight reels, but his presence explains why Arsenal can push bodies forward without losing shape. That value became crystal clear in his absence against Aston Villa. Rice had played through a knee knock against Brighton, even covering at right back due to defensive injuries, and the swelling that followed ruled him out of the Villa match. Mikel Arteta confirmed it was short term, but the decision to protect him said everything. Arsenal chose long-term stability over short-term risk, confident their structure could handle it. That confidence only exists because Rice is the reference point. When he's on the pitch, Arsenal's press is bolder, their spacing more secure, and their defensive line more aggressive. And when he's missing, his importance becomes even clearer, not through collapse or scrambling, but through how carefully Arsenal have to manage the balance he usually provides. And then there's the returning conductor, Martin Odegaard. hard. Since coming back into the side, Arsenal's attacking sequences have gained real clarity. Against Brighton, his goal grabbed the headlines, but the deeper impact was tempo. Arsenal's possession became sharper, more vertical when needed, and more patient when the moment called for it. Over the last 5 games, Arsenal's chance creation has increasingly flowed through his areas. Not because he forces it, but because teammates trust his timing. Up front, Arsenal now have genuine flexibility rather than a fixed solution. Victor Gyökeres gives them physical presence and penalty box gravity, as seen with his spot kick against Everton and his constant pinning of center backs. Meanwhile, Gabriel Jesus offers something completely different. His goal off the bench against Aston Villa came within seconds of stepping on, but the real significance went deeper. The intensity lifted, the pressing sharpened, and Villa's buildup immediately became frantic. Jesus doesn't just add goals, he raises the emotional temperature of Arsenal's press without breaking the structure. On the defensive side, Gabriel Magalhaes, returning over the last 2 games, has let Arsenal squeeze space higher up the pitch again. His goal against Villa mattered, but his real value is in first contact, stepping into duels early, letting Arsenal hold territory and recycle pressure. Alongside him, Arsenal's back line looks more assertive, which feeds directly into midfield control. What ties all these performances together is this: none of these players are winging it. Their form is emerging within a system that gives them clear instructions. Trossard knows when the box will be crowded. Zubimendi knows where the next pass is before he receives. Raya knows his defense will protect the central areas. Odegaard knows runners will arrive on time. Over the last 5 matches, Arsenal haven't relied on one hero. They've relied on roles being executed at a high level, and that's why the machine keeps rolling forward. This isn't a team riding a hot streak. It's a team stacking good performances on top of a structure that makes those performances count. What Arsenal represent in this title race is something very specific: control as a baseline. They are not chasing form, they are not riding emotion, they are setting the rhythm that everyone else must respond to. After 19 matches, the table reflects that reality. Arsenal have scored 37 goals, conceded just 12, and paired that defensive record with a process that has barely fluctuated week to week. Their expected goals output sits at 35.6, almost perfectly aligned with actual returns. That alignment matters. It tells you this isn't fragile dominance, it's sustainable. Defensively, Arsenal's numbers explain why opponents struggle to build momentum. 133 interceptions, 48 blocks, 424 clearances, and 0 red cards across the campaign point to a team that anticipates danger early and stays emotionally composed. They rarely need emergency defending because they prevent threats from fully developing. In a title race where one reckless moment can undo months of work, that discipline is priceless. Then there's territory, the most underestimated currency in a long season. Arsenal have recorded 665 touches in the opposition box, completed 9,417 passes, and won 110 corners. These are not cosmetic statistics. They show where matches are played. Arsenal force opponents to defend closer to their own goal for longer stretches, and that pressure accumulates. Legs go, concentration dips, decisions slow. That's when goals arrive. Set pieces reinforce that edge. With 6 goals from free kicks and 3 penalties scored from 3, Arsenal continued to turn territorial dominance into points even on days when open play is more controlled than explosive. Those margins add up, often quietly, but relentlessly. Crucially, Arsenal have reached this position while absorbing disruption. Injuries forced rotation, key players missed time, yet the structure never collapsed. That's why the return of leaders now feels so significant. Arsenal aren't fixing problems, they're sharpening strengths. The floor was already high, the ceiling is rising. Of course, no title contender is flawless. There are games where Arsenal regulate the tempo so tightly that attacking spontaneity drops. When chasing matches, their approach can drift wider, increasing cross volume, and with a completion rate around 24%, that isn't always the most efficient route to a breakthrough. These are real stress tests, not fatal flaws, but they matter in tight races. There's also the psychological layer. Leading changes everything. Every dropped point becomes louder. Every late concession carries weight. Pressure doesn't dismantle structure, but it can influence tempo, risk appetite, and decision-making in moments that define seasons. Still, when you step back and compare identities across across the race. Arsenal stand out. They are the team least dependent on game state. They can win when leading, protect narrow advantages, and dismantle opponents when control turns into dominance. As Aston Villa discovered, if the league remains orderly, if matches continue to reward structure, patience, and discipline, Arsenal are exceptionally well positioned to last the distance. Their defensive record, territorial authority, and emotional control are exactly what championships are built on. If the season turns unpredictable, Arsenal will be tested, not because their ideas are weak, but because football eventually demands answers beyond structure alone. And that's what makes this race compelling. 3 contenders, 3 identities, 1 trophy. Arsenal have chosen control as their path. Now the league will decide whether control is enough. This is why Arteta's new tactics are making Arsenal unplayable.